Welcome to Mental Health Mondays. I am your host, Atonte Myers, marriage and family therapist, along with my co host, Dr. Ricardo Whyte. And we have a very special guest with us today. And I will introduce her in just a moment. But we are happy that you are here with us. We welcome you. And we encourage your questions and comments as we start to share on the topic that really is a huge part of our program. And we just like to know, as always, where you are viewing from. We know we have a viewing audience from all around the world and all around the United States as well. And so so if you just put in the chat where you're watching from, we'd like to say a special welcome to you. And if this is your first time watching Mental Health Mondays, put a 1 in the chat. We want to say a very, very special welcome to you as well. So I welcome my co-host, Dr. Whyte. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing very well, Atonte. It's a privilege to be on. Super excited about the topic.
Yes,
And,
as you should, since you co-authored a book about this topic, you should be excited. Just want to say welcome to Dean Schultz from California. Hey, Dean, how are you? I believe, okay, Jamaica, I see the flag. So from Jamaica, welcome, Spokane, Washington.
Apple Valley,
Um,
California.
yes, PJ from Florida. Well, we really appreciate from India.
Yeah.
Hello. Or Indiana. Sorry. Need my other glasses on right now. Okay. Indiana. Wonderful. Bernice from Virginia. Yes, welcome. We are very happy that you are here with us this evening. You can keep putting in the chat where you are viewing from. I want to introduce our special guest. She is there in the screen. So welcome, Dr. Wallet. I'm saying it wrong, and I had it perfect before. Wallazonia.
Perfect.
Wallazonia. There you go. Got it right. Dr. Wallazonia. We are so happy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be a part of this tonight.
Yes, I just want to properly introduce you to just for you guys to let you know who Dr. Wallazonia is. She is a licensed clinical neuropsychologist. She obtained her doctorate in clinical psychology in 2014 from Loma Linda University and completed her predoctoral internship at the Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City. She completed much of her postdoctoral clinical training at UCLA's Semel Institute Neuroscience and Human Behavior and has served as a neuropsychologist at many Southern California hospitals. She is speaking with us today as the co-founder and COO of the Mastermind Institute. And she has also co-authored the book with Dr. Whyte, Killing Burnout. And so we are thrilled to have you here with us. So welcome again to Mental Health Mondays. Yes. Would you like to say anything, Dr. Whyte, as we welcome her?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I'm just privileged that she is on with us, and you'll see why we're so excited to have her as part of the Mastermind Institute. What were you going to say, Dr. Wallazonia?
No, I was just going to say, Dr. Whyte's talked about this platform for several weeks. We usually have a meeting right before this one. And so I'm just really excited to be able to be a part of it.
Yes, we are thrilled to have you. Killing burnout is such a huge topic right now. And really because we went through so much, right? Going through the pandemic, we're coming out on the other side of that. But I'm sure you guys are going to talk about this, you've seen an increase of those who are just burnt out because so why don't we start with that? Just, the level of burnout that you're seeing just around the country and even in your practices as well.
Yeah, the World Health Organization also talks about 30% increase in burnout coming out of the pandemic. As you consider, it would be so nice if the pandemic ends and everything is good. If only that were the case. And that is so far from the actual situation. So we're dealing with ongoing vestiges of the pandemic. There's still some issues that are going on.
Right.
Uh, so we're dealing with that increased rate of depression as well as anxiety. We are dealing with obviously increased gas prices, increased interest rates, um, decreased 401ks and stocks, and the things that you wish wouldn't increase are increasing. The things that you wish
Right.
would decrease are increasing. So it's just a situation where we as a population are being stretched, and our resources are really being challenged. So of course the result is worsening burnout.
Right.
Um, what we are really excited about is that for a long time, we developed resources for the acute care situation, for only a person who's in need of, let's say, emergency room services, or you need to be admitted, or you maybe even need to be seen by a mental health practitioner in like a one-on-one setting. But it's rare to have resources for those of us that are well and want to optimize our health. So that is the framing of this discussion that we're having this evening. Let's say you don't want to get to that point of overwhelm, and especially the clinical issues that are associated with being overwhelmed and getting to that point where you're developing a disorder and even suicidal ideation.
Right.
What are some of the things you can do to not get to that point? So at the Mastermind Institute, we love innovating processes that help you to optimize your health, to get active in your resilience. And we love introducing you to ways to do that systematically. So we're so grateful to Living Manna for giving us an opportunity to have that discussion in this context, Atonte.
Right. Well, it's such an important topic and discussion to have. So, Dr. Walazonia, tell us how you came into this with Dr. Whyte, how you guys came together and collaborated to do this book.
So I actually know Dr. Whyte from way back when at my time at Loma Linda. So he was my dissertation chair. And when I was doing my doctoral project, I had many instances of bugging Dr. Whyte to get things done and to get things completed.
But we go back further than that, because I actually taught an addiction class to her psychology cohort. And that's how the relationship started, where I saw, man, she's incredibly hardworking. So I was already impressed. And then she was like, hey, I want you to be on my dissertation chair. Take it from there, Doc.
So that went well. And then years later, he remembered how persistent I was with my doctoral project. And so he had some projects that he was working on, and I was in clinical practice at the time. But we just started collaborating on some different projects with the shared interest that, like Dr. Whyte said, we really focus on an active approach to mental health. And this is a little bit different than some of kind of the general available options. There's a lot of available options that focus on meditation or, relaxation strategies. And while there's a time and a place for that, we really feel strongly that in order to experience change, we have to do something about it. So with that shared interest, we were able to collaborate on some projects and then decided, to go forward with this book, Killing Burnout. And we have some more, books coming out and some projects coming out. But we really hope that, we can really make a wider footing in the world of mental health that helps people understand that they are in control of their destiny, right? They are able to change things. And it can be small things, and we'll talk about some of those tips and tricks today. But small things that we can do to help decrease that sense of overwhelm and to kind of build that resilience so that burnout doesn't become such of this overshadowing and overtaking emotion. So it was really that common interest that has led to our products now.
Right. No. And so what are some of the things that you can tell our video viewing audience? Like you said, or I think Dr. Whyte said it, that, we don't want you to get to the place where burnout becomes a disorder or it's a clinical issue. How do you know when you're not dealing with the stress of life? How do you know you're entering into that stage of starting to become burned out? But before you're actually there, like, what are some of those symptoms?
Well, what's interesting is if you look at the human function curve, what you'll see is it can be divided into eustress and distress. So normally when we think about stress, we often think about distress. But what's the difference? But there's actually good stress. So what's the difference between the two? The good stress is when you're being challenged to use your resources, but your resources are adequate for the challenge. Okay, it's actually a good feeling. It's actually a meaningful part. So things are good. You're in the zone. Things are clicking along. All is going well. But as you move up that curve, when your resources are being overwhelmed by the challenge, that's when you move over into the distress aspect of things. So what are the symptoms that show up at that point? Now we're talking about things like cynicism, fatigue, frustration, a sense of hopelessness, a sense that you don't have autonomy, you can't be self-determining, and a sense like, what's the point of all of this? And so those are some of the key features of feeling burnt out. And the worst part is, and you're noticing that you're not able to recover as quickly. The burnout is lasting. Because a lot of times we burn out. By the end of the day, a lot of us are like done. You're like, I need to go home.
Right.
But going home and getting a step away from it is enough to really kind of recharge the batteries, remind you why you're doing it. And you're really excited by the next day when you're going back in. But burnout is really dealing with there being less effectiveness in recharging the batteries. And so those are some of the symptoms that you will see as overwhelm takes over the experience. Was there anything you wanted to add to that, Dr.
I'll
Walton?
add to that, some of those warning signs that you're tipping over into that curve of distress are constantly telling yourself like, oh, it will get better. It will get better. I think we have this tendency to deny that things are problematic or that things are too much for us. And that consistent approach of, oh, well, I'll just push through some more. I'll just push through some more. And not feeling that recovery, like Dr. Whyte talked about, right? Not feeling like the next day you're like, okay, I've got this. But rather feeling like, okay, I just have to get through this day. But every day feels like I just have to get through this day. That's one of those warning signs where we would say, you're there. Now we have to intervene.
And I think
one of
no, go ahead.
I was just, the last part was, the importance of understanding, putting in the support structure before we get to that point where we're in crisis. That's something that we really stress, right? We want to help people create an organized structure for how they build resilience. So that way it's already in place. So that way when they do start to find that their abilities are in competition with their demands, they've already established a healthy ground for resilience. And that's really, I think the basis of what we're trying to teach.
I can hear all the moms and dads, parents out there saying, this is me every day. I just have to make it through this. I just have to make it through this day. You guys talk about in your book, the 7 vitals. So 7 vital things that are important. And you start with spirituality. So can you tell us about that? How can that help kill burnout, prevent you getting to that point?
So you'll see it in, for example, in addictions, where we talk about acknowledging that there's a power greater than myself, and that being one of like the first steps in recovery. But they're coming to a place of peace with this sense that there is something out there that's greater than me. And it's going to mean different things for different people, but getting settled and getting to a place where you're satisfied with your grasp of spirituality, it is incredibly important. Engaging in your process of answering those big questions of, who am I? Why am I here? What is my purpose? What made me? So the path that you travel to answer those questions, but it's a very important process because it does give you a sense of peace, a sense of being settled. And my goodness, it's critical when you're going through challenges to have a sense that you have those questions answered. So it's very meaningful work to engage in.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Did you have something to follow up?
And I would just add, I think that when we have that grasp of spirituality and those answers to those questions, it influences our actions and they help keep each other accountable, right? So then we check in, are our actions matching my actual values? And are my values reflected in my actions? And I think that grounding of spirituality can really help keep us on that path when we can ask ourselves at the end of the day, did my actions match my spiritual code?
Exactly. Because we talk about three facets to how you experience spirituality. The first is eating. And so then, of course, there's some spiritual material you consume. But then the next thing being, we'll say pray, eat, pray, love. And so, hey, how do I engage in, whether it's, focused meditation, contemplation, prayer, but how do I now really distill and engage with that content from a mental standpoint? And then, as Dr. Walazonia just mentioned, as you leave that process, what behaviors does that process produce? Well, we elaborate greatly on those three tenets in our membership, but that is just a little snippet. But they are a systematic process through which you can experience your spirituality and how you can grow in your spirituality.
I just want to remind our viewing audience that we are taking your questions and comments. But also, this is not just a book. This is a study guide. Like there's a guide. I mean, we have 6 more things we're going to go through, vital things but it's actually a study guide where it kind of takes you through step by step. Is that what it does?
Right. So there are some priming questions that help you with each section because we talk about some core ideas, but there are primers and there are, questions that you can answer to make sure that you're getting the ideas. And this is the primer for the textbook that we are writing at this time. So we call this the introductory guide.
Okay, so it's not completed yet, or it is completed. It is, right? The study guide.
Completed. We actually have 3 parts. So we have the introductory guide, which is kind of like a snapshot. It's a good feeler for, getting people's feet wet.
It's done.
So that is done. That's available on Amazon. Our other product is called our membership. So our Killing Burnout membership. And that's actually where we have videos where we talk about each of the vitals. And then we have like a live question and answer so that people can engage in that.
Okay.
And then the third part is the book. And that's what's being written right now.
Okay. So there's a good question out there. And it's on the screen. You guys can see that. It says, can we experience spiritual burnout? Mercy.
That's a phenomenal question. Well, so what we'll do is let's go back to the definition of burnout. So when you have resources being overwhelmed by challenges, so I can't. Were there any biblical characters that we can think of that were burnt out, that were past the point of their resources? And you can almost see in each person's experience, almost in most.
Moses was, and he struck the rock. He was done.
Yeah, Moses was, but there's an even bigger example in every character, even up to Jesus. Do you remember Gethsemane? You remember the Gethsemane experience where Jesus is like, look, if you could take this cup from me, if you could take this cup from me. You remember when he sweat blood?
Yes.
And the Bible literally says that angels were dispatched to restore him. And so the idea just being, even he felt overwhelmed, even the resources that he had, because the dread that he had, it wasn't the fear of being crucified. His dread was of being separated from his father. Okay. So can you experience spiritual burnout? Absolutely. You can experience, spiritual burnout, but your goal is to remain connected to resources and to make sure that you're tapped in. And that's why that process we say is so important, so that you can make sure that you are accessing the resources of your faith. So
and
what
I
are the
think
signs?
this will tie into the rest of the vitals. So because spirituality is one of the 7 vitals, what we really talk about is balance, right? So we can get burnt out on any of the vitals, but in order to be well-rounded, resilient, and overcome burnout, we really have to balance all of the 7 vitals, which we'll continue to talk about.
And it's as if there are ways to leverage the other vitals to support you in overcoming burnout in a given vital. So for example, if you're feeling spiritually overwhelmed, what's the next vital? The next vital is relationships. Okay, relationships. And so when we talk about relationships, we talk about the relationship with yourself, the relationship with, your significant other, and the relationship with non-significant others. Maybe you can talk some about that relationship with yourself and what role that can play in burnout or in resilience.
Yeah, so I think a lot of times, people don't acknowledge that they have a relationship with their self, right? So we go through our days and we have all these demands that other people put on us. You said as a mom, as a parent, a lot of times your life revolves around your child, right? Or your spouse or your work obligations. And sometimes we forget that we are our biggest support, right? We have to be able to focus on ourselves. Dr. Whyte has this great quote, when maybe you should say it because I don't want to butcher it, but when you land on this planet.
When you land on this planet, you have a responsibility to teach how you should be loved. Okay. You have that responsibility to teach that, but you can't teach that if you haven't learned it, and if you haven't learned to love yourself, right? And obviously we're not talking about making ourselves gods, but it's just that basic understanding that you have value from a spiritual standpoint. You've been designed with value, and it's important to acknowledge that.
And then with that value, you can then create meaningful boundaries and limitations that allow you to protect your value, right? So oftentimes we give in to other things that are not necessarily in line with our value. But when we can keep ourselves at the cornerstone of that relationship with ourselves, we're able to protect that value. And we talk more about, how you protect that vital connection with yourself. But one of the things that I'll just say is that we have the power of choice. And the power of choice is so important in choosing the people that we surround ourselves. So that leads to those non-romantic relationships. It also includes romantic relationships, but I'll talk about non-romantic relationships. So our family members, while they are blood relations, sometimes family members can be toxic, right? So we have a choice as to how much we let people in. And we're not saying to cut off relationships with family members, but we are saying to be mindful of how much you let somebody impact your value, right? So maybe this means, being strategic about the way that you talk to a family member that might be a little bit toxic, or how much you go to that person for advice. Maybe you go to that person for advice for smaller stakes things, but those things that are really meaningful, you really entrust with those people that you have set in your inner circle. Same thing with friends.
Yeah. But the key is to do that mental work in order to figure out what boundaries need to be set in order to optimize your relationships. Over to you, Doc.
Yeah, that's such a crucial part of it, because when you don't know your value, you don't know what boundaries to set, right? But when you know your value and you know your worth and you know what's important to yourself, it's much easier to set those boundaries and know when somebody has crossed a boundary. And so this plays a part with friends as well. Oftentimes we'll hold on to friendships that are toxic, and it could be out of obligation or because it's part of the friend group. But we really want everyone to know, you have this power of choice to choose the people that you surround yourself with. And then Doc's going to talk about romantic relationships, because that's a huge part of our relationships component.
Absolutely. And so I hope you're hearing how a fear of being alone can set you up to make poor choices. And so that opens up what I've dubbed broken picker syndrome. Broken picker syndrome. So whether it's that fear of being alone, whether it's that history of trauma, sometimes we can choose to establish romantic relationships that don't serve us, and that actually hurt us. And the idea being, it is so critical to make sure that you've taken the time to understand your value so that you attract, you welcome, and you set boundaries that allow you to have relationships that actually support you. And I want you to now see how your relationships, whether with yourself, with romantic or with non-romantic, can then be leveraged in helping you in, say, even like if you're feeling spiritually burnt out, back to her question. So now when you're feeling spiritually burnt out, imagine having healthy relationships that can help to restore you. And so that's why these things, they come together so that they can actually help you not be burnt out, but they actually can heal one another. Does that make sense, Atonte?
Yeah, everything you guys are saying is making sense. I'm for somebody like myself, this is not difficult to hear. This is like just a wonderful news to hear about putting those boundaries. But for some personality types, this is very difficult to do. They have a very hard time saying no. They have a very hard time setting boundaries. It actually hurts them to it in their mind. It's actually a good thing if they will do that, but they physically feel like, how could I do that? How could I say no? In some cultures, when you're talking about family, oh man, it's huge. It's huge. So, but it makes perfect sense to be able, and I'm circling back to the spiritual, because when we shared that, I was thinking, as a pastor's wife for 24 years, there's definitely been times where I have been to that limit of, okay, I am, if some changes aren't made, I'm going to be burned out. But I have to say that, early on in our marriage, in our ministry life, we decided that, we listen to ourselves and to each other so that we're always putting our time, our individual time is important too, but our relationship, our individual time together is so very important, so that we don't get burned out as a marriage, spiritually marital couple. And that's so very important. So you'll see this a lot with pastors' wives and with pastors' families. I talk to pastors' kids that say some of their memories of like going to church is like getting there at 9:30 and not leaving until 10 p.m. It's like a whole day. And then we wonder why they don't want to go to church when they're adults ever again, because they spent so much of their life there already. But
I'm hearing you say you leveraged your romantic relationship to be a support spiritually. And also recognize that, you know, if you don't set the right boundaries spiritually,
Right.
it can negatively impact your romantic relationships and your other relationships.
Yes, that's right. And we were
And
always on that same page to do that from the very beginning. But a lot of pastoral couples don't do that. They just, and it's, yeah, they don't do that. Not from the beginning. They realize they try to do it once it's already, once they're already there, and it makes it very difficult.
right.
Yeah.
And the part that is blowing my mind right now is, as we talk about the role that a mental health specialist can play, it can seem so like it's not that big a deal and it's not worth the trouble or the investment. And what you're seeing is there are people who are mentioning in the chat that they don't necessarily even feel like they have the right to set boundaries, or they don't even know how to set boundaries.
Right.
And all of this is cradled on, you need to feel like you have the self-worth that justifies you setting boundaries, that then further allows you to enforce consequences to the violation of those boundaries. And the basis of all that is self-worth. And there is so much trauma that can occur that can erode at a person's feeling that they have justified self-worth, that they're entitled to having self-worth. And so that's why work with a practitioner can be so critical in helping you fortify and rebuild and recover from so many of the traumas that we've sustained that undermine our feeling of self-worth. So it's really interesting.
Yes. You know, the next one of the 7 vitals is resources.
Yeah.
So tell us about that.
Yeah, resources is incredibly interesting because here you are, resources you normally think is just a good thing. And people often can miss that when you have a resource, that resource can also have you. You know, resources require you to tend to them. I'm sure we've all heard of white elephants, where you might be given the gift of a white elephant, but then you have to feed that elephant and it could eat you out of home and whatever other resources. So there's a book, Essentialism: The Disciplined Pursuit of Less. And it just being, sometimes as you simplify your life, it can play a role in reducing your stress level. And so, of course, this isn't necessarily advice, but it's worth you taking the time to pause and say, okay, as I take a look at my resources, am I making sure that I am not being owned by my resources? I'm not being overwhelmed by my resources to further increase my risk of burnout.
Yes.
You get to set the price on your escape from the rat race. You get to set that price. And so what price are you going to set? If you're going to aspire to the 5,000 square foot home and the Mercedes Benz and the BMW and the this and the that and the this, you're skyrocketing the price of escaping that rat race. Okay. But if you choose to modify that, then you might reduce your price for escaping the rat race and thereby escaping, in some ways, the threat of burning out. So we encourage having that discussion about where am I in my need for resources and in my management of resources, and most important of all, in managing my appetite for resources. Was there anything you want to add to that, Dr. W?
I would just say one of the practical tips for resources that I would share really has to do with being aware of your finances and where you spend your money and how that ties in to your other vitals, right? So a good tip is when somebody's making a purchase to actually ask, do I need this? And does it further my goals? Because oftentimes we just buy things because we want to, right? And a lot of people, overspend their budget. If they even have a budget, some people don't even have a budget set. And so being able to have, I think my video is frozen. I don't know if it looks
No,
frozen.
you're good.
Okay.
You're good. We're seeing you. We see and hear you.
Okay, wonderful. So, being mindful and having a plan. So that plan for finances is so important, because without that plan, that's when we get the spending on things. And like Dr. Whyte said, right, we spend on things that then come with other obligations and other responsibilities. And we haven't thought about that. And that leads to overwhelm, and that leads to burnout. So when we can be mindful at the very beginning, we can set that plan.
And the funny thing is, most of us, before we go shopping, you know what we look like getting ready? It's like you're pushing clothes apart to grab what you're going to choose, because it's already that full. And the car is not parked in the garage because the garage is filled with a bunch of stuff. So we've already got tons of stuff, that we're adding. Do we really need it? Okay. And the topic that we are talking about is burnout. We're talking about being overwhelmed. And that's why this is a very, very important thing to consider. We're not here to tell you what to think, but it's take the time to think so that you're reducing your risk of burnout.
And I think that leads so nicely into our next vital.
I was
unless
just
there was
gonna
anything
say,
else. Okay.
time would be
Perfect.
It just segues right into what you're saying. So you guys want to share about that?
So I want everyone to think about time as a currency, right? So when we value time the way that we value money, we'll see that we have a much different interaction with time. So typically, everyone, I think, can say that they waste time. But when people are busy and they have more demands, we find that they waste less time. And when people have more time, they don't have as many obligations or responsibilities, they waste a lot of time. So what this tells us is that with those people that are busy, they have to build in structure, right? They have to be mindful of their structure, because they don't really have the choice of wasting time. They need to maximize their time. So if everyone, the people who have a lot of obligations or the people that don't have a lot of obligations, if we can all be mindful of the way that we spend our time, we can be more productive, right? We all have choices. We go back to choices that we make about how we spend our time. And again, if we ask ourselves the purpose of what we're doing with our time, it can really guide what we choose to spend our time on. We might find that if we look at our day and we look at, how we spent our time, we'll find that we spent a lot of our time on meaningless activities. And if we could hone that time into something that could be more productive in line with our goals, whether it's spending time with a cherished relationship, spending time engaging in healthy activities, which we'll talk about. If we can think about our time and how we invest it in our other vitals, we can build resilience and lead to less burnout. And the cornerstone of all of this is planning. So if we fail to plan, we plan to fail, right? If we don't have a plan, it doesn't get done most of the time. There might be something urgent that gets done, but if we don't plan, we rob ourselves of this opportunity to spend our time wisely. And that leads to more failure, which then leads to more symptoms of burnout, which then leads to depression and suicidal ideation, right? So it's so imperative to use that time wisely. And so one tip that we have is for each person to think about 5 minutes in the evening. 5 minutes is not a lot of time. I can say with 95% certainty that most of us have spent 5 minutes on social media today that we did not need. Right? So if we take that 5 minutes at the end of the day and use it to plan our next day, it doesn't take that much time, but we have a plan and we're able to think about, okay, how am I going to structure my day so that I do maximize my time and meet my obligations and get some of those things done that I really want to get done? And then also plan in the fun things, right? The things that what we're going to do with our family, what we're going to do for our exercise for the next day. When we can plan all of that out, and I promise you, it does not take more than 5 minutes. You just think about all the things that you want to get done and you order it, and you can really maximize that time.
I need like about, I don't know how many copies, but I need over 2,000 copies to be delivered like tomorrow at the university, Oakwood University, that I'm working at, because I'm dealing with students, these young adults. And if this is the end of the semester, so all I'm hearing about is the stress and how they didn't plan. I mean, even though they knew the semester was coming to an end and they would have finals and all the projects, and they didn't plan. And so now they didn't plan all that time, and now they're so stressed out. And I even had a student say these words today. She's like, "I'm burned out." She actually said that. And I was like, "I'll be talking about that tonight." but the point is that these simple steps would help. I mean, it helps us in our lives, but in these college students' lives, it would just help them so much if they would do these things.
Can I just say this, and this is to really bring it home with time. I want you to have the same reaction when someone says, "Can I have 5 minutes of your time? Can I have 5 minutes of your time?" I want you to have the same reaction as if a person said, "Can I have $5?" Okay. If a person says, "Can I have $5?" you would immediately kind of jump to, "But for what? It's $5.
Right.
What are you going to do with the $5? Do you really need $5?" Then you're going to jump back and be like, "Do I have $5 right now? I don't even know that I have $5 on me right now." But you immediately start to assess, as opposed to the current mindset is, it's only 5 minutes. No, it's five. Like, think about it like you would think about it with $5. And with the students, my goodness, it's like if you were that conscientious about time when you feel like you have a lot of it.
Right.
Do I have 20 minutes right now? Do I have, it's like, I think that would be just so tremendous, but we need to see it as currency, much like Dr. Walazonia started. If we treated it like the precious thing that it is, precious resource that's very, very limited, then we would be so happy with how it unfolds. Because when you plan your time, then you don't end up over in this part of town and then you go over here only to find out you forgot this in this side of the town. No, everything on this side of town, we make sure we get that done. Then we move to this, and then we move to that. And it feels so good. So that's a fantastic tip. And that leads us. Go ahead, sis.
Well, I was just going to say, even though we haven't finished all of the 7 vitals, but still what I'm hearing over and over is to be balanced in your life, and to take time to be able to, organize your life so you're balanced, and then you won't get burned out.
And let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. It's because like students are experiencing it right now, but everyone's experiencing it. Life is going to pull you out of balance. Okay. Life is absolutely going to pull you out of balance. And even an adaptive response will require moments where you're out of balance. The problem is, if you don't know the 7 vitals, you won't even know what was distorted in order for you to get back to balance. Okay. Right. So the beauty of monitoring those 7 vitals is that you can know, okay, I am over here. We are moving the agenda forward, but I know that right now I'm sacrificing, whether it's health or purpose or this, that, the other thing. And so, once I can resolve the challenge, then I'm going to need to pour more into these areas that were distorted. But the danger is, if you don't even know what those 7 vitals are, you can't even know what was neglected. However, you will definitely feel the consequences of those areas being neglected. How tragic then to not know what they are.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So, that intention.
Go ahead.
Right? That intention is so important, because you understand, to get some things done, you do have to be out of balance. But your intention is to rebalance when you're done.
Right. No, that's perfect. Because of time, I don't want to miss any of these. So health is a big one. Tell us, health is huge.
Yeah. Health we divide into mental and physical. Okay. And so we are saying absolutely value your mental health. The top tip there is do not hesitate. Do not hesitate to come out of pocket to pay for a practitioner that works for you. Okay. Obviously, if you have insurance, leverage that. I just know that the field is so flooded right now that it's hard to book with a practitioner, even if you're paying cash, you know. But I'm saying do not hesitate to do that, to find a practitioner that works for you. Your mental health is worth it. Okay. Absolutely. This is just something. So we talk about mental health, and then we also talk about physical health. My practical tip for physical health is at least a little walk every day. At least a little walk. Obviously, you have to do everything that we're talking about in consultation with your health practitioner, but at least a little walk every day. And please understand that there is a very fixed connection between what you eat and your health experience. Okay. Yeah. I want to just shout that from the mountaintops. If you're not happy with health outcomes, explore what you're consuming. Explore it. Okay. Because it may very well be connected to the health outcomes that you're having. So health is vital. And I want you to see that when you engage in activities where you're exercising and you're eating the right things, that process increases capacity. And when you've increased capacity, that reduces your risk for burnout. Okay. And so you take a nice, good walk, you know, this is going to help your mental well-being. When you spend some time in nature, this, of course, helps restore your well-being in many ways. So I want you to see how these vitals work together to help protect you from burnout. I definitely want to give time for purpose. Okay. Purpose is the big one. Purpose is like at the heart of the matter. And in our context, we talk about the 3 dimensions of your purpose. I think most people actually stay super busy to suppress having to deal with the big questions of life. Who am I? Why am I here? What is my purpose? And so in our book, we talk about the 3 dimensions of purpose, and we spend time and really delving into it in our membership experience. But we talk about the first dimension being your path. Okay. And what lessons do you learn from the story of your path that constitutes your path? That story is telling you stuff. It's informing you. It's giving you clues about your purpose. And then we talk about the second dimension being your talent. You have a talent that you've been given. There's something that you're very patient with. Okay. There's something you have a natural aptitude for, but it constitutes a talent. Well, you have a responsibility to distill that talent into skill. And that's the second dimension. So you see, I'm building a triangle. You got the base. That second dimension is talent, and then distilling it into skill. And then you have your third dimension. The third dimension is impact. You have a responsibility to make an impact, to leave the world better than you found it, to utilize and leverage the influence. Okay, moment to moment, we have influence, to utilize that influence for good. All right. In a spiritual context, we talk about being godlike, God entrusting us with positions to show what he looks like in our respective positions. Okay. So life is like a witness. But what you see, Atonte, is that within those 3 dimensions, the dimension, the first dimension of your path, the second dimension of your talent, the skill, the third dimension of impact, and that calling to godlikeness, lives your purpose. Lives your purpose. So we help you go through that process so you can identify and customize your understanding to what is your grand purpose. What were you going to say, sis?
Would you say that if someone is living in their purpose, it's easier for them not to get burned out or to be balanced?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Viktor Frankl, quoting Nietzsche, he says, a man who has a why can get through any how.
Mm.
A man who has a why can get through anyhow. In Viktor Frankl's book, The Man's Search for Meaning, he really underscores the power of meaning in helping you overcome. So right now, either of you would say to me, look, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I cannot wait to start slowing down and getting ready for bed. You're exhausted, you're done, you're burnt out, maybe even. But if I were to say to you, hey, your daughter is trapped under a car,
Mm.
who's tired? Who's tired now?
Right.
Who's exhausted now?
Yeah.
Who doesn't know what their next step needs to be? Okay?
Mhm.
Because you're clear on your why.
Mhm.
Because now you have a purpose. That's how powerful a purpose is. A purpose can have you completely recalibrate how much time and how much resources you have. So a purpose is incredibly powerful. What were you going to say, Dr.
Yeah,
Toby?
to kind of put it in vision of how important purpose is. So, we're trying to get all of this into an hour. We spend 3 months on purpose in our membership because purpose is such a huge underpinning for all of our actions and really influences all of our vitals. When we know why we are doing what we're doing, it makes it so much easier to make those other decisions in the other vital realms of our life.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And we're just in time for the last vital, which
Yes.
is rest and recreation. Rest and
Yeah.
recreation. And this is one of my favorite ones. But were you going to say something, Dr. W?
Mhm.
Oh, yeah. This is one of my favorite ones. And this is where Dr. W was actually talking about the fact that one of the smartest things you can do as you look at planning your entire year is install the vacations first. Install the vacations first. Do not make the vacations an afterthought. In
Mm.
fact,
Mhm.
build life around the vacations. Like
Like
it's
that.
clear.
I like
It's
that.
so powerful. So
Mhm.
powerful. But the
Mhm.
idea being rest, like again, we go back to this idea of I have value. When you recognize you have value, then you understand you must celebrate. You must put on the lens that recognizes your achievements. You must take the time to recognize, look, I'm grateful for the eyes that help me see and the ears that help me hear and the legs that transport me from time to time. You've got to take the time to have some gratitude for the things you possess and the things that you've achieved. And part of not having a healthy sense of self can at times undermine you taking the time to recognize and celebrate your wins. That's a tragedy. It's a betrayal of the gifts you've been entrusted with. So imagine you being you being given the gift of the brain that got you through your master's program or your doctoral program, and you not taking the time to celebrate that you've accomplished that. You get a new job and you don't celebrate the fact that you've gotten this new job. What is the message to your body? More than that, what is the message to yourself? And then what is the message to the loved ones that supported you to achieve these endeavors? It's like you undermine yourself, and sometimes it can create blocks when it's time to go for new achievements. So you take the time to rest and you take the time to recreate. You take the time to see what are the opportunities for improvement. And so rest and recreation. Listen to the word recreation. And those are those 7 vitals that we design in a year-long experience so that people can be active about engendering resilience in their life.
So the helpful tip that I'll share for celebration as part of our rest and recreation component is at the end of each day to think about your wins, right? So these can be small wins, big wins, anything that you did that contributed to your goals is a win. And when we get in the habit of being able to intentionally acknowledge that, it helps build our worth. right? We're reminding ourselves of all of the good that we've done, all of the good things about us, rather than focusing on the negatives. When we can focus on those wins, it intrinsically improves that sense of self and that value that then helps lead us into our next day well.
So we do have a special offer for your audience, Atonte.
Okay, because I was just gonna have our producer Amra put up the link for
Killing Burnout.
the guide in Amazon. But go ahead. What's the special offer?
Absolutely. So obviously you can definitely go to Amazon and pick up the introductory guide. But for those of you that say, look, I want more of that, experience, just email me at Dr. Whyte at the Mastermind Institute, Dr. Whyte at the Mastermind Institute, and just say free month. Okay. Free month. And what we'll do is we will sign you up so that you can experience that free month. You'll put in your information, so on and so forth, and you'll be billed at the end of the month so that you can get that free month. You can see what the experience is like. But we want you to kill burnout before it starts. Okay, that's what
we're really passionate about this. We really want people to be able to experience this transformation and to see that life can be happier and healthier and more purposeful. And it doesn't take a lot of activity. Like, this is not like those boot camp classes where you're drenched in sweat and you feel like, what am I doing through this? It's interactive. We really enjoy the conversation between our group members. It's a really cool place to embrace resilience and learn these strategies that can really help increase quality of life.
Wow.
And you can get active about your mental health.
Yes.
Was that helpful, sis?
This was wonderful. This was wonderful. And they could also go to killingburnout.com.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So
you can see all of our information on there.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yes. Well, this was awesome. This was awesome, and you just broke it down in such a simple way that I know that our viewing audience was able to receive and is very blessed by the information. I just want to. Goodness, we can actually, I wish we almost had a longer program tonight. We could go on and on, but we know your brother's in town, Dr. Whyte. You have to go.
No, he's got to focus on his relationships.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay. You gotta draw boundaries, set boundaries, and say, okay, Mental Health Mondays. That's all I can give you. It's okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, but this was great. This was great, and thank you so much to both of you for. You're here every week, but thank you for your presentation as well. This was such a blessing. We'll have to have you back.
Definitely. This is really fun. I really enjoyed it.
Yes, and it goes by fast, doesn't it? It's just like,
it
does. Like that.
Yeah. See, we respect the time. We respect our time.
We have to.
I love it.
Yes.
Love it.
So, well, thank you all for viewing. Please share this program. This for every human on the earth. This information is for everyone, and so please share on your social media platform. And we just look forward for you coming back next week as we will have another mental health topic. Thank both of you. God bless.
Till next time.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.